May 29th, 1453. The sun has not yet risen over Constantinople. For nearly 1,000 years, these walls have stood against every invading army. But tonight, everything is about to change. Outside the city, thousands of Ottoman soldiers wait in silence as giant cannons shake the darkness. Standing among them is a 21-year-old sultan. His name is Mehmed. Many believe he is too young, too ambitious, too obsessed with a dream that generations before him failed to achieve. By sunrise, he will either conquer the greatest city in the world or lose everything. But this story does not begin outside the walls of Constantinople. It begins over 2 centuries earlier with a small tribe of nomads and a dream that would one day become an empire. In the late 1200s, a small Turkish tribe called the Kayi was on the run. Mongol armies were tearing through Central Asia, burning cities, scattering entire nations. The Kayi fled west into Anatolia, a borderland between the Islamic world and a crumbling Byzantine empire. They had no wealth, no army worth mentioning, and no land of their own. What they had was a young leader named Osman, and according to legend, a dream that changed everything. In this dream, a tree grew from Osman's chest, and its branches spread until they covered the entire world. His advisors told him it was a sign from God. Whether the dream was real or invented later to justify what came next, historians still debate. But what Osman built afterward was very real. In 1299, he declared independence from a dying Seljuk state and started raiding Byzantine towns nearby. He was not the strongest leader in the region, not even close, but he offered something powerful: land, plunder, and purpose to any warrior willing to fight under his banner. Turks, and even some Christian mercenaries looking for opportunity, began flocking to his side. A tribe with nothing had just planted the seed of an empire. Osman never saw his empire truly rise. He died right around the time his son Orhan finally captured the city of Bursa in 1326. Orhan turned Bursa into the first Ottoman capital, and something shifted. This was no longer a band of raiders. It was becoming a state with taxes, administration, and a plan. And Orhan needed something no army in Europe had yet built: a permanent, professional fighting force loyal only to him. What he created would define Ottoman power for the next 300 years. Young Christian boys, taken from conquered territories, were converted, trained from childhood, and raised as elite soldiers of the Sultan. They were called Janissaries, and unlike every other army in Europe at the time, they were not knights fighting for personal glory. They were professionals, disciplined, loyal, and terrifyingly effective. By 1354, the Ottomans crossed into Europe for the first time, capturing the Gallipoli Peninsula. A small Anatolian tribe had just stepped onto a second continent. Historians still debate exactly how deliberate this expansion was, but one thing was clear: there was no turning back now. By 1389, the Ottomans under Sultan Murad al-Fivdara had pushed deep into the Balkans. A coalition of Serbian nobles, desperate to stop them, gathered their forces at a field called Kosovo. The battle that followed was brutal, and by its end, both armies had bled each other nearly to nothing. But there is a twist historians still find remarkable. In the chaos after the fighting, a Serbian noble pretending to surrender walked close enough to Murad and assassinated him on the battlefield. The Sultan who built the Ottoman Balkans died in the very moment of his greatest victory. His son wasted no time. He had his own brother executed to secure the throne, a grim pattern that would repeat for generations to come. The new Sultan was Bayezid, and Europe soon gave him a nickname, the Thunderbolt, for how fast his armies moved. In 1396, a massive coalition of European knights marched against him at Nicopolis, hoping to crush Ottoman power once and for all. They failed completely. Bayezid's victory was so decisive that Europe's hopes of stopping the Ottomans seemed all but over. He grew bold, laid siege to Constantinople itself, and began calling himself the Sultan of Rome. He believed nothing could stop him now. He was wrong. Far to the east, a conqueror named Timur, sometimes called Tamerlane, had built an empire even larger than the Ottomans. In 1402, the two powers collided at the Battle of Ankara. Bayezid's army, exhausted from years of endless campaigning, was shattered. The Thunderbolt himself was captured alive, something almost unthinkable for an Ottoman sultan. He died in captivity the following year, and the empire he built nearly collapsed with him. His own sons turned on each other in a brutal civil war that lasted over a decade. For a moment, it looked like the Ottoman story might simply end here. 4 brothers, 1 throne, and a decade of betrayal. That was the reality of what historians call the Ottoman interregnum. Sultans, Isa, Musa, and Mehmed fought, allied, and betrayed each other in shifting combinations, while the empire their father built fractured into pieces. One by one, the brothers fell until only Mehmed remained standing in 1413. He spent his reign quietly stitching the empire back together, region by region, alliance by alliance. It was not glamorous work, but without it, there would have been no empire left for what came next. His son, Murad II, inherited a stronger foundation and immediately faced a new European coalition at the Battle of Varna in 1444. He won decisively. Strangely, Murad briefly stepped down from the throne to hand power to his own teenage son, only to be called back when the empire needed his experience again. That teenage son would not stay in the shadows for long. His name was Mehmed, and he was about to become the most famous sultan in Ottoman history. We are back where we started, outside the walls of Constantinople. May 1453, Mehmed II had spent years preparing obsessively for this single moment. He commissioned a Hungarian engineer to build cannons larger than anything Europe had ever seen, some reportedly capable of firing stones weighing hundreds of kilograms. When even that was not enough to break through by sea, he did something almost unbelievable. He had his ships dragged overland on greased logs, straight into the harbor the Byzantines thought was protected. For 53 days, the ancient walls held. On the 54th, they finally broke. The last Byzantine emperor, Constantine XI, is said to have died fighting in the streets rather than surrender his city. By nightfall, Constantinople, a city that had stood for over 1,000 years, belonged to a 21-year-old sultan. Mehmed did not destroy the city, he rebuilt it. He converted the Hagia Sophia into a mosque, but also protected the city's Christian and Jewish communities, understanding that a great empire needed everyone's skills to survive. From this point forward, he would be remembered simply as Mehmed the Conqueror. The Ottoman Empire was no longer a rising power on the edge of Europe. It had just become one of the most feared states on earth. Mehmed's conquest was only the beginning. Within decades, Sultan Selim I turned Ottoman ambitions south and east, crushing the Mamluk dynasty of Egypt in a series of rapid, devastating campaigns. With Egypt came something even more valuable than land: control over Mecca and Medina, Islam's 2 holiest cities. This gave Selim, and every Ottoman sultan after him, the title of Caliph, the recognized leader of the entire Muslim world. In less than a decade, the empire had nearly doubled in size. The stage was now set for the man history would remember as its greatest ruler. Suleiman came to power in 1520, and almost nothing about his 46-year reign was ordinary. In the West, they called him Suleiman the Magnificent. In his own empire, they called him Kanuni, the lawgiver, for rebuilding the entire Ottoman legal system from the ground up. He captured Belgrade, crushed Hungary at the Battle of Mohacs, and in 1529, brought his armies all the way to the gates of Vienna itself. He did not take the city, but he came close enough to send shockwaves through every royal court in Europe. Under his rule, Ottoman territory stretched from Hungary to Yemen, from Algeria to the shores of the Caspian Sea. But Suleiman's story was not only written in conquest. He fell in love with a former slave from his harem named Hurrem, and broke centuries of tradition by making her his legal wife, a decision that gave a woman real influence inside the Ottoman court for the first time. Under his patronage, the great architect Mimar Sinan designed some of the most breathtaking mosques the world has ever seen. Poetry, law, science, and art all flourished at once. This was not just a golden age of conquest, it was a golden age of civilization. And like every golden age in history, historians note, it carried the seeds of what would eventually come undone. Suleiman died in 1566, during yet another military campaign, at the age of 71. What followed him were sultans who, one after another, lacked his discipline and his drive. Power slowly slipped out of the throne room and into the hands of grand viziers, court officials, and the women of the imperial harem. This period even earned its own name among historians, the Sultanate of Women, when mothers and wives of sultans quietly shaped the fate of an empire from behind palace walls. Meanwhile, the Janissaries, once the empire's most disciplined weapon, began to see themselves as kingmakers rather than servants. They deposed sultans they disliked and installed ones they could control. The empire that once conquered continents was, very quietly, starting to conquer itself from the inside. In 1683, the Ottomans made one final, massive attempt to take Vienna, the city that had escaped them for over 150 years. Grand Vizier Kara Mustafa Pasha led over 100,000 troops to its walls, confident this time would be different. For 2 months, the city starved and burned under siege, but somehow it held on. Then, on September 12th, a relief army led by the Polish king John III Sobieski arrived and launched what remains one of the largest cavalry charges in recorded history. The Ottoman army broke and fled. It was not just a military defeat, it was a turning point. For the first time in centuries, Europe realized the Ottomans were not unstoppable, and from this moment on, the empire would mostly be pushed backward, not forward. The 18th century brought something the Ottomans had rarely experienced before: stagnation. While European powers raced through scientific and industrial revolutions, the empire largely clung to the systems that had worked centuries earlier. Russia in particular grew into a relentless rival, defeating Ottoman forces again and again, and slowly pulling away territory around the Black Sea. By the 1800s, European diplomats had started calling the once feared empire the sick man of Europe, a phrase meant to sting, and it did. Sultans like Mahmud II and Abdul Mejid tried desperately to modernize through a series of reforms known as the Tanzimat, rebuilding schools, laws, and infrastructure in a bid to catch up with the West. It helped, but it was not nearly enough. Across the Balkans, something else was rising: nationalism. Greece fought for and won independence in 1830. Serbia, Romania, and eventually Bulgaria followed, each uprising chipping away another piece of an empire that had once seemed permanent. Estimates of how quickly this decline accelerated vary among historians, but the direction was undeniable. By the early 1900s, the empire that once stretched across 3 continents controlled only a fraction of what it once had. A group of young reformers known as the Young Turks watched this collapse and decided they had seen enough. In 1908, the Young Turks forced the Sultan to restore a constitution, hoping reform could still save the empire. It could not stop what was coming. In 1914, the Ottoman Empire made the fateful decision to join Germany and enter the First World War. There were moments of genuine Ottoman triumph, most notably at Gallipoli, where Ottoman forces successfully repelled a massive Allied invasion against overwhelming odds. But elsewhere, the war was catastrophic. Arab territories rose in revolt, famously aided by the British officer known as Lawrence of Arabia, tearing away the empire's grip on the Middle East piece by piece. This period also holds one of the darkest chapters in Ottoman history. Beginning in 1915, the Ottoman government carried out mass deportations and killings of its Armenian population, resulting in the deaths of an estimated 1.5 million people. A tragedy widely recognized today as genocide, though the exact classification remains a sensitive and debated diplomatic issue in Turkey itself. It remains a wound that has never fully healed, and one that historians continue to study and discuss with the seriousness it demands. By 1918, the war was lost. The empire that had once stood at the gates of Vienna was now being carved up by the very powers it had failed to defeat. In 1920, the Treaty of Sèvres reduced Ottoman territory to almost nothing, a humiliation that sparked fierce resistance across Anatolia. Leading that resistance was a former military officer named Mustafa Kemal, a man who refused to accept his homeland's dismemberment. For 4 years, he led Turkish nationalist forces through a brutal war of independence, eventually pushing out foreign armies and securing a new, defensible Turkish state. In November 1922, the Ottoman Sultanate was formally abolished. Sultan Mehmed VI, the very last man to hold a title that had passed through 36 rulers over 623 years, quietly boarded a British warship and left Istanbul forever, never to return. The following year, on October 29, 1923, Mustafa Kemal, who the world would come to know as Ataturk, proclaimed the birth of the Republic of Turkey. In 1924, even the Caliphate, the empire's final religious authority, was officially dissolved. An institution that had shaped the fate of Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa for over 6 centuries had come to a complete and final end. The tree from Osman's dream, the one that had grown to shade the entire world, had finally stopped growing. From a handful of nomads fleeing the Mongols to an empire that stretched across 3 continents, ruled Constantinople, and shaped the modern borders of over 30 countries. The Ottoman story is really the story of power itself. How it is built through vision and sacrifice, how it is sustained through discipline, and how eventually every empire, no matter how magnificent, is undone by the very comfort and complacency that its own success creates. Osman had a dream of a tree covering the world. For a while, it truly did. But history has one rule that no empire has ever broken. Everything that rises eventually falls. If this story of rise and ruin fascinated you, subscribe to Empire Tales, because this is only one chapter in the story of how empires are born and how they die.